In the next few videos, we will examine the various elements and kinds of typeface and how they interact. We will contrast sans serif and serif fonts, as well as print fonts and web fonts. Throughout this module, we will also look at ways to combine font pairings and formulate hierarchy templates for the use of text in specific design projects.
Typography is an art. More specifically, typography is the art or procedure of arranging type or processing data and printing from it. And as you can see from this diagram, there are many design factors and artistic characteristics that make up typography. But nowadays, with the digital designs of documents, you often hear the terms typography, typeface, and font used rather interchangeably. Traditionally, typography is the visual component of the written word, visually rendered in different ways. It is an art form concerned with making and arranging type in legible and readable formats, whereas typeface is a particular design of type, and font is a typeface in a particular size and weight. Individual typefaces are usually identified by a family name, such as Times, Helvetica, or Arial, and some additional terms indicating style, weight, and width are mainly used to denote kinds of fonts. In short, a typeface usually encompasses many kinds of fonts, such as italics, thin, or bold. But each of these typefaces and their fonts are categorized into two specific categories. The main two kinds of typefaces are serif and sans serif. Serifs are the small finishing strokes or flourishes on the end of a character. Serif actually means feet in French or line in Dutch. Sans serif are fonts that do not have these small finishing strokes on the bottom of the letters. The word sans in French means without, so therefore it means without feet or flourishes. Some examples of serif fonts include Times, Century, Garamond, and Baskerville, all of which have those little flourishes on the letters. Some examples of sans serif fonts include Arial, Helvetica, Cabrini, and Century Gothic, which are without those little strokes at the ends of the letters. This is a serif font called Times. This is a sans serif font called Cabrini. Notice how the invisible baseline is where most of the serifs or lack of serifs tend to show up. The lowercase a is usually a good starting place to look for differences between serif and sans serif fonts. Capital letters such as T are another way to look for the differences because the serifs will or will not show up at the top of the letter or at the bottom of the letter that's on the baseline. Also, take a look at the difference between these lowercase f's in the two different fonts and how the accenters differ with the feet or extra decorative flourishes at the top of the serif font, which is Times, versus the sans serif font in the lower sentence, which is Cabrini, which is without those flourishes. Here we have serif fonts Times, Garamond, and Baskerville. Notice the decorative fonts in the capital T's. Even within these serif fonts, the flourishes will differ depending on the typeface. Then, if we compare the word in all of these typefaces, you can see even the dot in the letter I differs in weight and overall look. Next, we have sans serif fonts Arial, Helvetica, and Cabrini. Notice how the capital letter T, there is a lack of serif or flourish on any of these typefaces, as well as the weight of the main stem and top strokes tend to differ or kind of tend to be the same weight dependent on the font. Then, if we compare the word is, you can see even the dot in that I, in all the different I's, differs in weight, and the S also differs in overall look and even the curves. A third kind of font is called decorative. These typefaces are fancy fonts that should be used sparingly in things such as headlines or other more graphic parts of a piece. Dingbats or wingdings or even some emojis are also considered decorative fonts. Again, these fonts should be used sparingly because can you imagine reading a huge block of text or a book in any of these fonts? But they would serve fine as a header or some other decorative element. An argument on which kind of font is better has been raging for decades within the typographic community on what seems to be a very insignificant issue. Do serif fonts contribute to the legibility of typeface, and by net definition, are sans serif typefaces less legible? To date, no one has managed to scientifically prove a conclusive answer to these issues, but we can look at the difference between legibility and readability. Legibility is concerned with how well you can see letters, even the very fine design details of a typeface. And in an operational context, this usually means the ability to recognize individual letters or words. Whereas readability concerns the optimum arrangement and layout of whole bodies of text that make it easier to read. Be it serif or sans serif fonts, either can be legible or not legible, and either can be readable or not readable. So legibility refers to the distinguishability of each character in the typeface. How easily can the font type be perceived? Whereas readability refers to the presentation of the entire text. How easily can the reader navigate through words and lines? However, it might not just be the font choice itself that makes something more or less legible or readable. Notice all the different characteristics within this graphic. There's things such as point size, which is determined by X height, line spacing, kerning, tracking, the different ascenders or descenders, or even how the baseline is handled with a serif or not a serif that have an effect on the overall design of a project. So as we covered in other lessons, there are many factors that typographical choice critical to design. Serif fonts tend to be more readable because they have those feet anchored to the imaginary baseline. But sans serif fonts can still be readable because they tend to be cleaner and leaner, and to some people are therefore more legible. And then there are decorative fonts that, as we said, should be used sparingly, but can also be a way to tell the design story of a project. Be it serif or sans serif or even decorative fonts, good typography has one main aim: to gain and retain attention. According to Steve Jobs, design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. Add typography to that mix, and it becomes the visual component of your written message, adding to the look and feel, helping to make the piece work.